It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in the man.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in the man. Right.
That's the one that's the one that we want up there. I wanted that screen, not the other screen, and here we are. That's why I was sort of I just typed good morning folks into the
Restream is not working.
What? The chat?
I can't get
Are we on Restream at all this morning? I mean, is it going out to
I see us on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
There's 10 people watching so far. Good morning, everybody.
But you're saying the chat function is not working on Restream.
I have reloaded Restream twice, and
thank you.
So I will be monitoring Facebook.
Thank you, Restream. Oh boy, there and we'll have to monitor Twitter as well. But I know
I can't get into Periscope.
One of our what do you mean you can't get into Periscope? You don't know how?
We'll talk about that detail later.
What? You can't get into Restream.
I can't monitor Restream. I can't monitor Periscope during the show.
Well.
But anyways, we're getting hi from Facebook from a few people, so I'm just monitoring Facebook.
All right. And we can have one of our guests monitor Twitter for us because she's a Twitter pro. And she's going to be with us in just a second, as soon as I say hi to everybody. And
well, we have to do the Hippiaster
updates. Oh, right.
The
Hippiastrum report. Show us yours, which is out of frame because it's so tall. That's the problem I had with the one I had for a couple of weeks back there. Yeah, look at that.
It's kind of lily-like.
It is. It does look like a lily. And those of you watching who are saying, that's an amaryllis, no, you're wrong. It's not. But it's called an amaryllis
and
everywhere.
We got yours behind you.
Well, wait, let's bring that here. I'll bring mine in. It's some nice, there we go. Isn't that sweet?
Pretty.
Yeah. And I got a pot of them in the living room that aren't going to bloom at all, apparently.
Yep. I have several pots full of leaves.
Yep, just the leaves. And the one that I had here is now out on the back porch. I actually started taking some of my plants out back. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to keep an eye on the temperatures to make sure that they don't get below. I'm not sending out the whole group, but I did take out my. Maybe it was a mistake. My huge. I don't know how much it weighs. It's got to weigh 80 pounds, maybe more. My Chiflura, which is 8 feet
your holiday
tall.
Tree.
My holiday, yes. I put my Xmas lights on, so that's out back. Some of the other plants are out back because it was too warm this week. That was a little scary to have 80s. And it's amazing. And we should ask Rick DiMaio about this when we talk to him later in the show. What is it about weathercasters? And this is my pet peeve here. One of my pet peeves, and there's a lot when it comes to the weather, folks. Yeah.
We have a weather rant warning.
Yeah, right. And it is why is it that all rain is bad, no matter what. It's like, oh, it's going to rain. Oh, that's just so terrible. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? We're too dry here, kind of in a semi-drought, and you're going, rain is bad. And the other is warm weather is always good. Doesn't matter if it's 80 degrees in December, for a week. Nobody says, wow, that's really weird. It's like, oh, it's 80 degrees. Let's go out with our short sleeve shirts. It's like, no,
Get off my lawn.
no context at all. No, no context about the climate change or anything. And it makes me want to
Shut up, Wesley.
All right, there we go. But if
Where'd the end of that go?
what do you mean the end of it?
There was only one.
Oh, yeah, no. There's no point in having three punches because you don't even get to see him throwing a punch.
Shut up, Wesley.
All right, so there you go.
Okay. Alrighty.
All right, so that's my rant about the weather, folks. So blah 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 blah. But now we get back to normal weather, and of course the 80 degrees took out most of my daffodils. They just are all blasted now and sort of. But that's okay, because I'm sure one of our guests here will say, well, why don't you have native plants? Well, I do actually have lots of natives. They're just not quite as spectacular in the spring. What?
Well, my bloodroot have been blooming this past week. My
good.
trilliums are all getting buds.
Right.
Bluebells are starting.
Yeah, my bluebells are starting. My mayapple is being its thuggish self and taking over a whole swath.
Well, that's what they do.
Yeah, I know. They just, and then I'll rip out a bunch of them and transplant them someplace else, and they'll do that someplace else. So there you go.
It's called naturalizing.
So native plants is partly on the schedule today. Monarch butterflies are on the schedule today. Piping plovers or plovers, however you want to pronounce that, are on the schedule today. We got some great guests here. Let's just get. Wait a second before we do that. Let's make sure that I've got my cheat sheet. Otherwise, I will not do this right. Okay, there's the cheat sheet. Hello. All right. Now I feel comfortable in bringing in.
And now
there's Erika. And Erika, I didn't ask you the other day. Do you pronounce your last name Hasle? Is that how you pronounce it?
I do. It's like it has two S's, but it doesn't.
Okay. Erika Hasle, who's a conservation ecologist at the Field Museum, and her partner in crime, Izabella Redlinski, also a conservation ecologist from the Field Museum. And they contacted us a couple of months ago and said, we are working on a project at the Field Museum about monarchs, monarch community science. And we'd love to talk about that on your show. And we said, are you kidding? Let's do it. Because as you know, and maybe you don't know because we're only into April here, the numbers coming out of Mexico with the overwintering monarchs were down again. And that is something that, Erika, you're trying to address here. If you look at the numbers in the last decade, it's not good. If you look at the numbers over the last 20 years, it's a like that. Even averaging out some of the better years, and that's a disturbing trend, isn't it, Erika?
Yeah, there've been some good years in there, but it's been a long time since we've had a good year. And the general trend is toward serious decline there are two populations. So we're the eastern population east of the Rockies. There's the western population, which some folks may have heard. They'd count those around Thanksgiving, and that was less than 2,000 individuals. Wow. The western population is bigger, or the eastern population is bigger, so there are more monarchs. But our number, the population that they counted this winter was quite low. I think it's one of the 6 lowest that's been recorded. So that's not good, as they say.
Well, no, it's not, and people do confuse the two populations and conflate them. They are separate and distinct populations because the western monarchs, which are west of the Rockies, basically, overwinter in California mainly, right? And the eastern population overwinters in Mexico. And traditionally the eastern population has been much larger than the
Yeah.
western. But the western population is, I don't know, it's a goner if you ask me. It's hard to imagine. It was at 1 million a few years ago, and now it's down to 2,000, fewer than 2,000. And how does the species bounce back from that?
I mean, you're in the territory where you have to wonder if there's going to be a captive breeding program. But part of the Western population is more complicated in a lot of ways. We're fortunate in that our milkweed here in the Midwest, certain species really conform to that weed part of the name. I mean, I've seen common milkweed growing in my alley, in the cracks in the sidewalk. It's a lot harder to grow milkweed in the West. It's obviously drier in the West. I think some of the challenge there is loss of that overwintering habitat. Some of them were actually lost in the California fires. So it's there are many things causing decline of both populations. The West is less well understood, but folks are working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there's climate change. So that just
well,
adds insult to all the injury.
And welcome into the conversation, Izabella. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Yeah, you're right. But climate change leads to things like the forest fires, the wildfires in the West. You can say that you can draw a line there, and if that results in habitat loss, then you have the loss of the species as well. So, but you guys are mainly focused on the eastern monarch, right?
Yes.
So, Izabella, since you came into the conversation now, why don't you explain what you guys are doing? And by the way, you both work for the Keller Science Action Center. You guys need superhero costumes for the Action Center.
The cape. There's a cape right there.
And
I like to call us K-Sac, like K-pop, for all your fans who also are fans of K-pop.
All right.
You got the first bell, Erika. That should go on your resume.
There we go.
Okay.
I'll keep call them Erika, Izabella. How many bells each?
All right. Isa, why don't you explain what you're doing with the Monarch Community Science Project?
Sure. So pretty much what we're trying to do is think of what makes a successful urban patch for the monarch butterfly, right? We know some people plant one milkweed and they find 4 caterpillars just munching it down. And it's okay if the caterpillars are eating down your milkweed, that's great, because that's why you planted it.
Yep.
So don't be scared of that.
Well, you're not going to eat it yourself because you'd probably throw up.
True. But we want to know, what is it about it? Is it the placement of where the milkweed is? Is it the species? Is it the number of species? Is it the number of species combined with other plants that are growing there? So there's a lot of unknown, and science is taking tiny little bits off of every one of those questions. And we know that urban areas really matter. So back in the day, like 5-6 years ago, Erika, jump in to correct me there. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that, the monarch is in trouble and we need all hands on deck to help it. So that means every type of land use type needs to be involved. Your national parks, sites of highways, agriculture, state parks, everyone needs to do their part. And then they looked at urban areas and went, not so much, no milkweed there. And Erika and some other colleagues before I came into Field Museum looked around and sort of also went, no, there is a lot of milkweed in the urban areas. We see it where we live, where we work, where we play, where we worship, and there's a potential to have more. So people got involved in this really interesting research, seeing how much milkweed there is, and then based on these sort of exemplary sites where there's landscaping done with native plants, seeing how much milkweed there can be, and sort of projecting that to urban areas around the east, where the eastern population of the monarch is. And we found out that almost a third of the 1.8 billion stems of milkweed could be provided by urban areas if we do our part. And that is converting less than, half of your lawn to native plants. Like Doug Tallamy asked us to convert half of our land into the Homegrown National Park, which is a fabulous idea. It even accounts for less than that. So yay, urban areas are important, but we want to know, how do you structure that urban habitat in a way that would be most optimal for the monarch habitat? So we ask people to monitor their lawns, their native patches for milkweed, and check them for eggs. And Erika can tell you more about it because that is her baby. She runs that project. We're in the 3rd year. And I don't know if I can even call myself her co-pilot, but she's definitely heading us forward on that.
Well, one of the things, Erika, I'd like you to explain is the monarch's unique relationship with milkweed, because we talk about milkweed. Talk about that relationship and what else the monarch needs to thrive.
For sure. And Isa is definitely, this is a team effort. Everything we do at the museum is very collaborative. So monarchs and milkweed, scientifically you call it a host plant relationship. But adult monarchs will only lay eggs on milkweed. They can actually taste the milkweed with their feet. And there's some evidence that they have a preference for the more toxic. So while some people will know and think of milkweed as toxic, it's, you probably wouldn't want to eat it. Although I'm told that people do eat the seed pods. I've not tried that. I should. So the adults will only lay eggs on there, and then the caterpillars will only eat milkweed. And they will definitely move between plants in a patch. That's really been documented. But they will consume milkweed. They go through 5 insect life stages, which are called instars. So you can kind of watch them get successively bigger, and then they will leave the milkweed plant and go somewhere and form a chrysalis, and then turn into a beautiful butterfly, as we all learned in the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar as children.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, so the one thing I always say is, in the 2 different significant parts of their lives, the adults drink nectar from flowers. If they drink milk from flowers, that would be impressive. So they need flowers. They need all of the different flowers that people can have. They need plants blooming throughout the year. They're not here yet. They are in southern parts of the U.S. now. They're in Oklahoma, Missouri. I think one has been seen in St. Louis already. But so they need all the different flowers that you can plant. They can't subsist on just a field of milkweed. But the caterpillars need the milkweed.
Okay, and which brings us to specifics. Every yard is different. Every patch is different. I know Peggy and I talk about this, and you see monarch caterpillars in your yard, right, Peggy? I do not.
Yes.
I see monarchs. In fact, last year I saw a monarch pretty much every day. I could walk out into my yard, and it would come over and to the milkweed or the Joe Pye weed or the coneflower. They love the coneflower. That's where I see a lot of
the purple or the yellow coneflower?
Purple. Sorry, thank you for asking. Purpurea, right? But I have yet in several years to see a caterpillar. Why is that? And are there explanations for that?
Well, Mike, we need you to participate in the Monarch Community Science Project. That's what it is.
So if I participate, the caterpillars will show up.
Yes. No, but maybe we can help you answer some of the questions. So we would ask you to look at your milkweed plant once a week and see if there's eggs. Perhaps there are no eggs in your patch, or perhaps something is eating your eggs, which is okay because it's part of the life cycle, right? The eggs are a nutritious, delicious treat for many other insects.
The ants love them.
Ants? Wait, stop. Ants go after milkweed? or rather, monarch eggs?
Yeah. So it's some poor grad student put a camera on eggs and watched all the film, not our grad student, of what happened. And so interestingly, a lot of the predation happened at night. So I should say, like, we're asking everyone to do this project. One of the hardest things, I think, for people, we thought the hardest thing would be asking people to look every week. Most people are happy to do that. It's that you're gonna see eggs that don't turn into caterpillars. You're gonna see caterpillars that don't make it through all of their life stages because they do get eaten. Even though the caterpillars are like toxic, and I mean, not like it will kill a bird, but not tasty to birds, they do disappear. One of especially the big predators for eggs is ants, um, and also spiders probably.
Spiders.
Yeah.
And I've watched caterpillars, I've watched wasps just pull them right off the plant.
Yeah.
It's tough being a monarch, or trying to become a monarch butterfly.
Yeah. But
It's
so
a
as
jungle
Isa was
out
saying,
there.
yeah, you're getting the zeros from people who feel like they have planted a garden but they're not seeing stuff. Those are really helpful to us
Really?
because we're trying to understand, like, what are the components, because we hear this from people. I planted milkweed, I didn't see anything. I planted milkweed and I saw caterpillars, but they never made it very far. And so we need kind of the data from those, along with the data from the gardens where people are like, I have 5 monarch chrysalises under my patio table. My monarchs are doing great. So, because we don't know, everyone asks us, how can I plant a good garden for milkweed? And we have some ideas, we have some suggestions, but we don't have science that says this are some of the components of a really successful garden. These are some of the components of a garden that's, not as successful for monarchs.
So, Erika, do you have any information or any data on soil? If soil affects some soil properties affecting the way perhaps that the plant is tasting to the caterpillars?
We
Or the
don't. I
nutritional
want
value.
everyone. I want all the soil scientists to please look into this. I feel like we don't know enough about urban soil, particularly urban soil. I mean, so we're not just talking about how to plant habitat for gardens. We're talking about, or for monarchs, we're talking about in urban places. And ecology in urban places is not as well studied as it is elsewhere. Things that we looked at initially in the project that we thought might be important because they're important in like a Medewan, so far have not shown to be particularly significant for urban places.
Such
So
as?
I think we don't. Well, so there's some evidence that the density, so how close the plants are to each other in a big place like a forest preserve or a Medewan, is possibly important. But I think it has not tracked with the success of gardens in urban places, probably because they're substantially smaller. So you're not like a monarch, trying to find more milkweed in a 5,000 acre prairie. You're in a, 20 square foot yard.
And that's what I have. I mean, I don't have a 20 square foot yard. I have more like a 500 square foot yard, but that's kind of tiny. And you're right. I have seen eggs on the leaves, but I've never seen a caterpillar. I don't have a camera there, so I don't know what is getting the
What's munching?
what's munching on
That's
the
an
eggs.
intense project.
Yeah, but it's not a bad idea. It might be kind of interesting, especially if I spot one and then monitor it just to see what's going on. But that's part of what the whole project is. And you bring up a really interesting point, and Isa, you alluded to this earlier, that there have been studies now that show the urban areas might be a key to preserving monarchs, simply because more people are planting milkweed, and milkweed is being destroyed in agricultural areas by products like glyphosate, and otherwise known as Roundup, and which farmers can apply to their fields. And Erika, you and I talked about this the other day. You can see nowadays a stray Roundup Ready corn stalk in a field, a soybean patch, but you won't see milkweed. And that in the old days, that's what would pop up in those fields.
Yeah. So that urban piece is super important, and it's a part of it's a piece of the puzzle. So yes, we have to plant in our urban areas, and everyone should have a milkweed plant or 5, and that'd be really wonderful. But then this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but as everyday citizens, we should also urge that we have legislature out there to plant more milkweed along highways, to maybe give more money through the Farm Bill or other programs to farmers to have prairie strips in their cornfields and soybean fields, where that milkweed will thrive and it will provide habitat, because that monarch has a really long way to fly. I mean, it flies thousands of miles both ways. So it needs the milkweed, it needs nutrients, it needs nectar, both on the way up and on the way down south. So also planting, I think Erika was alluding to this before, the adults need nectar. So planting stuff that blooms earlier, blooms middle of the year, and then blooms at the end of the year. I know goldenrods get a bad rap, but there's a good goldenrod for any habitat, the same way like there's a good milkweed for any habitat. Put those in your garden. They're so beautiful. They literally buzz with pollinators, and they are a great source of nectar, nutrients for the monarch butterfly migrating south. So combining your goldenrods with few asters, that purple yellow or blue yellow color is just beautiful for any garden.
And we have had a question here from a colleague of yours and a friend of the show, Trevor Edmondson. Hey, Trevor. I'm glad he's watching.
Trevor.
He's watching.
And so the scientists are watching today also, so don't screw it up, folks. He
Now I feel under pressure.
No, you don't. He says, I've heard that monarchs prefer swamp milkweed if given. Whoa, the light just went out. That's not good. If given the choice. What kinds of milkweed should people be planting?
It's a great question. So as Isa said, there's a milkweed for every situation, and I always say that the milkweed you should plant is the one that you like and you want to take care of.
And that grows in your yard.
Yeah, and it grows in your yard. If you have a heavy clay, wet soil, don't try to plant a butterfly weed, although it will grow in a pot. So you can do butterfly milkweed in a pot. You can do swamp milkweed in a container in a pot. They both do well. The butterfly milkweed is probably less likely to come back the next year in a pot than a swamp milkweed. But we do have.
All right,
wait.
Can I jump in here? But
yeah.
The part of the problem with that, and I've tried to grow
tuberosa.
Yeah. Asclepias tuberosa, or known as butterfly weed. It's the orange one, which I've tried to grow.
The supermodel.
Right, and I've tried to grow it in my yard unsuccessfully, and I don't even have terrible clay soil, but it drains pretty well in here. And you said it might not come back in a pot, but it takes a few years for it to reach its maturity. So how do you reconcile that?
So I have to say, Isa, go.
No, go ahead, Erika.
So I think if people are going to do it, and then we'll answer Trevor's question. If you're going to do something in a container, swamp milkweed is the one I would pick. I know people who start butterfly milkweed indoors and then have it as a container plant for the growing season, and then it often doesn't come back. Sometimes it will. So you're probably not going to get a flower. It's more of because you want to do it. Although we have somebody in the project who has butterfly milkweed very successfully growing in a container.
Yeah.
So we should have them on. But to answer Trevor's question, from our data, so we have vastly orders of magnitude more data from common milkweed than anything else. It's by far the most common of people doing our project. We have about the same amount. Yeah, we have about the same amount of data from swamp milkweed and Canada and butterfly milkweed. And so there is preference shown to common milkweed in our data currently, but we have a lot more data from that, so it's hard to draw that conclusion. Between Incagnata and butterfly milkweed, we see more success right now, and this is only 2 years of data, with swamp milkweed. However, I will say one thing I wonder about is it's much harder to find eggs and caterpillars on a mature butterfly milkweed. There's a lot more leaves and branches, and so some of that could be just you do have to see them.
Yeah. It's
You're not
harder
gonna
to
miss-
see the munching patterns to know if they're there.
Yeah, you're not going to miss like a full fifth instar, almost ready to go into a chrysalis-sized caterpillar. Those are multiple inches long, but the little ones are quite easy to miss. So you have to
Okay.
factor that in with any data. I mean, citizen community science collected or collected by a scientist.
Okay, we need to
You're
take
gonna miss stuff.
we've got more questions coming in. It's kind of interesting. We've got the question about the red bugs on milkweed plants, which
Yes.
that's
The aphids.
well, no, not necessarily. No, I
And
don't.
the milkweed bugs.
Milkweed,
yeah.
insects.
Yeah.
So,
But also lots of aphids too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't worry about aphids, basically, but especially not on milkweed, that's for sure. All right, it's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll even show some photos here to give folks help with the project. We shall return. You have the ability to give your soil a superpower. It's called composting. If you don't have a backyard, you need to contact Collective Resource Compost. CRC has diverted 7,000 tons of food scraps since 2010. They bring you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter from your kitchen, they swap it out and get it to a commercial composting operation. Fight climate change. Go to collectiveresource.us.
At this time of year, we spend a lot of time indoors with our plants, so help them thrive. The plants you're viewing were treated with Leafzyme, a foliage spray designed to activate beneficial microbes already present on the leaves. A spritz every few weeks promotes growth-enhancing microorganisms that process dust and other particles into nutrition that indoor plants can absorb through their leaves for beautiful and vigorous growth. Go to blazing-star.com and check out their BioGarden line for home gardeners.
From small boat fishermen to your dinner table with safe, free, no-contact delivery, Sitka Salmon Shares brings premium wild Alaska seafood to your door. They're a community-supported fishery offering shares just like your local CSA. All fish is wild-caught in season with respect for the limits of the ocean. Line-caught and traceable to their fleet. Use promo code NOVAC25 for $25 off the first month of a share. Go to sitkasalmonshares.com/NOWAK. And welcome back to the show. I'm sending you, Peggy, something that odd thing. Did you get a text from Rick DiMaio?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
and I'm familiar with what he's talking about vaguely.
You are? Okay. See, I'm unaware of that.
It was on the Facebook site we were looking at right before the show started.
Oh, was it? Okay. Do you want to mention this by any chance?
Rick might mention it.
Okay. All right. There's I see. I hadn't heard about it at all, and now we're just teasing people here. But I don't want to talk about something if I don't have a little more information about it.
I'll take a quick peek at the 10 o'clock break at it.
If you can, that would be helpful. Welcome back to
We
the.
also had a. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
There's a question from YouTube I want to bring up, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just doing my standard radio intro.
Exactly. That's why I said.
Yes. Don't interrupt the announcer, please. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We've got Izabella Redlinski on the show and Erika Hasle, both from the Field Museum at the Keller Science Action Center. And we're talking about the monarch community science monitoring. And this project is about to get going in earnest. We should mention this before we forget, is that you're going to have some training sessions coming up, and that's kind of the reason you guys are here. So who wants to talk about the training sessions?
I'll go. Do you want me to go, Isa?
Sure.
Okay. Oh boy. So I am, of course, like, what are the exact
You're-
dates?
Calling them up now on the screen, right?
May 12th, 15th, and 27th.
Well, there's 4, I thought.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one's an advanced training.
Oh, okay.
And we will also have trainings in Spanish in June to connect with our Latino friends who, have a strong cultural connection to the monarch butterfly. And many of the Mexican Americans in Chicago come from the Michoacan region where the monarchs overwinter. So we are doing a big push to connect the cultural benefit and the scientific benefit into one wholesome, beautiful thing. But go ahead, Erika.
Yeah. So what I was to say is we invite folks, anyone to participate in this project. All you need is one milkweed plant to start with, although we'll help you out with that if you don't yet have one. So the trainings are May 12th, 15th, and 27th. And we try to have them. There's like a lunch one, there's like a weekend morning one, there's an evening one. We will have some more in June if those dates don't happen to work for you. And these are on Zoom. This is something we discovered in 2020, is that this part where we like tell you what we're asking you to do, which is to look once a week at your plants, tell us how many eggs and caterpillars. We have a little web form that you fill out. And then once in July, we actually ask you to measure the size of your garden, just because that helps us with understanding like what these gardens look like. And then in late June, or sometimes in early June, depending on where in the city you are, we will have these socially distant, COVID-safe plants where we give away a milkweed plant. And if we can, at those sites, we will have flagged milkweed that's growing in the ground that has an egg or a caterpillar on it. So you can see one in real life, because that's the part that's harder to, it's impossible to do over Zoom, to really convey like what exactly people are looking for. And so we have a website, which if you do bit.ly/monarch monitors, you can register on there. We'll give you all the information. And that's the site where you would record your data. So we want to make it easy for folks, and folks can look on there. We have a lot of resources in both English and Spanish. There will be additional Spanish language trainings as soon as we hire our staff to help with that. And I should say that these milkweed plants are entirely possible because Isa grows them at UIC.
I think saying that I grow them is a big overstatement. We have a beautiful collaboration with the UIC greenhouse, and they do most of the dirty work for us. We start the plants there. I get the seeds, I stratify them, we plant them, and then they nurture the plants in the greenhouse. And around this time now, they start taking them out to hardy them off so we can plant them. And we have butterfly weed that we potentially can give to participants. So that's tuberosa. We have the swamp or rose milkweed. Rose milkweed is being rebranded because having the word weed and swamp in one name is just not a good PR strategy.
Nope.
So that's the one that can take a little bit of shade and can take moist soils as well as full sun. And then we have world milkweed because it's a little versatile plant that, you can pop into those empty spots in your garden. I like that one because it's not big. It's delicate. It's sort of
It's very fine leaves.
Yeah, fine leaves, and a caterpillar can totally munch it down. And yeah, so people can pick, and usually we try to also pair that with a late blooming nectar source that can benefit the monarchs as they're migrating south.
Yeah.
So all the participants qualify for that, and we're going to have those drop-off sites throughout the Chicagoland. So there'll be one on the north side and south side and west side and northwest and southwest, and maybe some even in Gary, Indiana.
Are there species of milkweed you would not recommend people For instance, the annual milkweed that seems to be an issue in California because it doesn't it continues to bloom, and it's a source of disease for monarch butterflies.
And somebody in YouTube asked about the tropical milkweed as well.
That is the tropical milkweed.
Yeah.
Please do not plant the tropical milkweed, and Erika can testify to it. She saw it blooming on election day. So, it does few things. It doesn't always die back, and it can harbor a lot of disease that then, once it gets into a monarch population, can help to decimate it. But, it can be another reason, another paper cut, the death of 1,000 paper cuts. So don't do that. Also, it encourages some monarchs not to migrate because in their head, they're like, hey, this might be a different time of the year. Look at all this milkweed blooming. And climate change ain't helping with that because, it's warm, milkweed's blooming. It can be October. Well, it is. So try not to do the tropical milkweed. There's a milkweed for any habitat. Some are a lot harder to grow than others. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a lot of different kinds of milkweed out there, and they're specific to certain areas of the world and certainly the country and North America. So you should, what I've always heard is pick the milkweed for your area, and there's a number of them to choose from. And, for instance, the Midwest, get Midwest milkweed, and there are different varieties that you can find. And you guys, of course, are encouraging folks to try different varieties as well. By the way, I was just looking up the milkweed bug, and that's what it's called, small milkweed bug. Ligaeus calmei is the Latin. Primarily seed eater. They're opportunistic and generalists, according to the University of California. And they'll get protein from wherever they can find it. And the bugs have few predators. They feed on milkweed, which makes them distasteful. And it seems to me it's kind of a sign. If a bug is orange, leave it alone. Because it's been ingested.
It has bright colors. It's trying to warn you.
And a big red X on its back. Stay away.
Yeah. So, and from what I understand, and you were nodding there, Erika, the milkweed bug is not a particular problem for anybody.
No, I mean, so I think one of the things that, we've done this project, we did it in 2019, it was our pilot year, and then we did it in 2020, the pandemic year. So I'm excited to have what I hope will be a slightly more normal year this year. But one of the things that people shared with us is how much, I said we were worried about asking people to collect data for us every week because that can be a lot of work, especially if you have a lot of milkweed plants. But what we found is people were looking more often and they were noticing things that they had never noticed before. Last year, a lot of aphids. People will see the milkweed bugs. They'll see Japanese beetles. They'll see spiders that they haven't seen before. And so I think that's one of the great things about the project is when you focus on one small thing like an egg, you suddenly notice it's like a different scale of looking at your garden. And I maybe didn't notice problems in my garden because I was focusing on these small things. So yeah, maybe young milkweed beetles might occasionally eat an egg or even a small caterpillar that has been reported, but it's not thought of as a major predator. There's a great group called the Monarch Joint Venture. I know that's kind of an odd name. But their website has a ton of information specifically about gardening, about the insects that we know about, just a lot of these questions. So, I'm enjoying answering them. But if we don't answer a question, I highly recommend their resources. And they have created things that are like very printable and shareable. So if you maybe have a neighbor or an HOA who is not as supportive of what you're doing, there are some resources there that you could share with them.
Also penetrate the HOA and start changing the rules so that everyone gardens with native plants. And if you have a contractor, that you hire a contractor that gardens with native plants.
I'm glad you brought that up. I imagine HOAs can be among your worst enemies here when it's trying to get, especially milkweed, anything called a weed.
Yeah.
An HOA is going to say, nope, can't have that. We can't have that. And it's bad enough that a lot of them say, whoop, not growing any vegetables either, because it might attract rats.
Not putting in those messy milkweeds.
Isa has the right strategy. It's an infiltrate and overthrow scenario. Yeah.
And as you said, choose the right landscaper too.
Yeah, we should throw a plug to our colleagues who are working to change the Chicago landscaping ordinance. You would have to register your garden, but then you could, within the rules in Chicago, have plants over whatever the current rule, 10 or 18
10
inches,
which is ridiculous because even your hostas, which I don't like, are over 10 inches.
Anything's over 10 inches. A daffodil out there is more than 10 inches tall. We have talked about that issue on this show and the proposed native plant registry for City of Chicago. And I have issues with it. It might be a way to keep people from getting fines for growing natives in their yards. I think it's going to cause more chaos, but what do I know? Maybe it will accomplish some good. The 10-inch rule seems to have come out of nowhere in the mists of time. It's been there forever, and for some reason, every municipality in the country thinks that 10 inches is the appropriate height at which to stop plants, and go out in nature and see how many 10-inch plants below 10 inches you can find. Good luck with that. So it's I don't know where that's going, but let's move on here and show some photos before we lose the opportunity to do that. And this is one we were talking about at the beginning. This is Asclepias tuberosa butterfly weed. So this is the plant that I cannot grow. But other people can. Tell us a little.
We'll make sure to give you a couple this year.
Yeah, and I'll try them again. And this time, I can tell you one thing that's happened. Sometimes I lose track of them. I plant them and then I forget that I've planted them. And then instead of helping them through that first year, I've forgotten they were there, and then they're gone. And we've mentioned this. Anything else you want to say about this, about butterfly weed?
It's if you have a big sunny, not even a big, but a sunny, drier spot, this can be your plant. It's really beautiful. It grows up to about knee high. Might not bloom the first year. It might be year 2 or 3 when it blooms, but when it does, it's quite a show that it puts up.
Yep.
And many things will be attracted to it. It's not just the monarch butterfly. It will start growing and sprawling, and native plants sleep, creep, and then they leap.
Except in my yard.
Except in your yard.
Except in my yard.
So that makes it a rule, right? Because every exception makes the rule. So
okay. And
you could try a different place in your yard too.
I will do that too, but I've already tried that. All right, what have we got here?
So you got a monarch caterpillar. So this is what we're having people look for. It's on a common milkweed, and I think we shared this in part just because sometimes people, when we say like you're going to look for a caterpillar, they first think that they're like hairy or maybe hard to find. After the sort of first few days, they're pretty easy to find, even on your large, common milkweed plant.
Are those tiny caterpillars nearby? The white things. What are those? Are those caterpillars?
No, Isa, what's your take? They're not aphids.
They're not aphids. At first, I thought that maybe they're like, when the caterpillar was growing and shedding its skin, that might be parts of it, but I'm not completely sure, because usually the caterpillars, once they grow and shed, they eat that because that's an important nutrient protein source.
All I got to say is a lot going on that milkweed leaf.
Yeah,
There's a,
someone once said that a milkweed is a milkweed metropolis because it attracts so many different insects, and then some insects eat those insects, and so it's a full circle of life on this one plant.
let's look at this. This is Messy and Neat. That's the name, the title of it. But I'm telling you, I was thinking about this when I was loading it last night. They look the same to me. I don't think one is any neater than the other or messier than the other. Why do you say messy and neat?
Well, I think we a lot of people hesitate gardening with native plants for many reasons. One is because, all my favorite plants have the word weed in it: thimbleweed, joe pie weed, ironweed, milkweed. We need to have a PR campaign for those plants. But you can actually arrange them to look like a traditional garden. And especially if you're doing it with seedlings or plugs, it's easy to do. But sometimes they can have a wilder look. And if you're into that, I'm into that, that's fine too. And, also as plants grow in and come in, they will start filling in those empty spots, and maybe having a sort of a line where one species ends and the other begins. It's more fuzzy, and that is okay. But if people want to have that traditional feel to a garden where it sounds like, like Lurie gardens, they're all native plants. Some are cultivars, but they have that very like traditional garden feel to them. There's crisp lines between where one species ends and the other one begins. And some gardens don't have that, and that's okay too.
Well, the answer is have Pete Udolph come and design your garden, and then everything's going to be absolutely.
Because we can all afford that on a small scale in our urban yards.
But I like the way both of these gardens look. That's
I
the
do
other
too.
thing. Yeah, I think they're fine. And here's another one.
Yeah. So
Eric,
that's
no.
my mom's front yard.
Oh, that's your mom's?
That's my mom's front yard. And
Okay.
my mom was a traditional gardener, with her dahlias and roses and peonies and all of that. And I started just giving her native plants. And because I'm like my mother, I can't say no to free plants. She started incorporating native plants into her garden. So now she has this beautiful garden with something blooming from now through November. And a lot of it is native plants in there, but she also, has her traditional garden native plants in there, and it's fine. So the message we're trying to tell people here is, if you have a traditional garden, you don't have to get rid of those plants to incorporate a native plant. You can incorporate a native plant into what's already existing.
And you can see the rose bush on the end there, and that's certainly a traditional plant. It looks like it's being pushed out by some of the other plants, but it's still there.
American the tall bellflower has become very evident in that garden. But she also has some milkweeds. She has asters. She fell in love with Short's aster, so now she propagates that and gives it to her neighbors. She's a great advocate. And I always, people walk by her yard and are like, what do you do? And she's like, well, those are those wild plants. She calls them wild plants.
Wild plants. I like that. Speaking of wild plants, this is a plug for the Field Museum, obviously. We've got, you advocate small and large gardens. You're saying that you can grow natives even in tiny gardens like the one on the right.
Correct. So you don't need 100,000 square feet of space like we have outside of the Field Museum with our rice native gardens, and those are free for everyone to enjoy. So if you're in the area, pop in, see how that's evolving. But you can see this is a small garden on the back of a patio, and there's a rose milkweed or swamp milkweed behind those purple plants just plopped in there. And it's a small space, it's an urban space, and it's incorporating that native plant into an array of what you would call a traditional or conventional gardening.
And we talked about the various types of milkweed. Is this something that you will be handing out or that you can find on the site? It's got the various types of milkweed up there at the top, that row of photos at the top.
Yes, so we create these field guides that are a guide to nature, and we have many on birds, and Doug can probably talk to that later on. But we have them for for butterflies and for plants and for street trees. Pretty much, it's a free resource. You can go to fieldguides.fieldmuseum.org and choose Chicago as your area, and you'll see what's available. And this is one to creating a habitat for the monarch in the Midwestern garden. So it has different types of milkweed, some of them more common ones. We then put Mead's milkweed, which has a threatened and endangered status on there. But those are things you can grow. It tells you a little bit about their habitat, and then it also gives you some other plants to plant for the monarchs.
And you can see some of them here. Some of the different milkweeds growing in different situations. And I wanted to pop this up as well. Folks can get a hold of one of these signs, can't they?
Right. Erika, want to take that one?
Yeah, so we'll be giving these away at the plant distributions. It's something people have asked us for the last couple of years, is they want to acknowledge what they're doing and share it with their neighbors. So we finally had some budget to get these yard signs printed.
Nice.
So those will be available for pickup. And the other side is educational. This side is more of our political message, or not political, but our message. This is why I'm doing this. So we wanted to have that, and folks, also there's a QR code and a link to our site. So if your neighbors want to join in, it's never. I mean, there's a period when it's too late to join, but we welcome people joining. In June and July. July is the big month for monarch eggs and caterpillars in Chicago.
And you do need to sign up for the training initially to take part.
We do, yeah. So we want people to sign up for the trainings. There's some in May. There'll be more in June. We just haven't put them on the calendar. I think we like folks who start early and get in on the May training and get us those first few weeks of data in June are often really low, sometimes zeros. That's okay. Again, that really helps us to know where they're kind of getting their foothold. But some people don't think to start or consider doing a training until they've already seen a monarch in June.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We got you. We'll have some trainings later in the year. Yeah.
Yes, Peggy.
And before we run out of time, Isa, you're also going to be doing a presentation tomorrow.
Yes, for Illinois Wild
plants.
Ones. Right. So I'll put a link under the Facebook message that Mike put out and the Twitter message. But Illinois Wild Ones has me come over and talk about practical advice to gardening with native plants. So that's tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Zoom.
And that's good to know. Also, one more thing before we go, and your boss is coming up after 10 o'clock. I see him in the preview screen. He's and Bob Dolgan's there too, but that is Doug Stotz, also from the Field Museum. It's a field day we're having here on the
best kind of day.
The best kind of day. Very quickly, we just have a couple of minutes here. You and I talked the other day, Erika, about how the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was considering giving endangered species status to the monarch, but has decided not. Can you just address that briefly? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Sure, let's do the hard stuff. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, for everyone who doesn't know, that's the branch of our government who's in charge of endangered species. I do not work for the Fish and Wildlife Service. That's very important to say. They were petitioned to list the monarch as an endangered species. And I think, firstly, most of us, when we think of an endangered species, we think of something that we've never seen, and there's only 6 of them in one lake somewhere in the West. But that's not always the case. It's a sign that the species is struggling, that they're not doing well, that they're experiencing a significant population decline. So monarchs, I'm not old enough to remember, but people tell me that there used to be clouds of monarchs moving around. And when something sort of slowly disappears, we tend to not notice those small declines. But we do know there's been this significant decline. So their petition to list the species, and what they determined was that listing was warranted. There was a reason. There was a significant risk of losing the species over time, but that it was precluded because they had other things that were a higher priority, and so they would revisit it in 2024. That may change. There could be pressure from organizations who have more of an advocacy role than we do to make that listing sooner. Certainly the really dire numbers in the West, if it was possible, but it's not, for them to list just the West, that would make sense. And I think there are questions of like, what would it mean if something that anyone in Chicago can definitely see this summer if they want, to be an endangered species. And it wouldn't mean that like the milkweed in your backyard, suddenly now you could like get fined for cutting it down. Almost, there are ways for them, the Endangered Species Act is very complicated. There are ways for them to make that not sort of the critical habitat that there is a legal protection for. But maybe it would give stronger protections to really large grasslands, which are important not just for monarchs, because that's the secret, right? Like, we do a monarch project because monarchs are important, because people love monarchs, and I love monarchs, and I want people to protect them. But also, we really care about bees and all the other pollinators. But like, no one's gonna call me to speak to their kids about beetles. I mean, some people would, but most people won't.
I would.
There are not.
I would absolutely.
Yeah, there are not fly festivals throughout, that people invite us to. Few people send me photos of their child like holding a bee,
or a fly.
Or a milkweed bug.
Yeah, but milkweed bugs are cool. I'm sorry. There's a lot of insects out there that are ultra cool, and maybe Doug will address that after 10 o'clock. We're out of time here, but Erika, you took the hard subject. You did a great job on it, and
She gets a ring.
All right, there you go.
There we go.
A double ding. You get a double ding. And in some circles, it's a really controversial question about putting monarch butterflies on the endangered species list. And we could go for an hour on that alone. But I want to let folks know that all this information we've been talking about, the links are on my website, MikeNowak.net. Go to the This Week Show blog. Erika Hasle and Izabella Redlinski, thank you so much. Good luck. And I hope a lot of people sign up for
Please do.
The project. Become a citizen scientist and get involved. I think I might have to do it too, and go out there once a week. And the one thing that's really great that we forgot to mention is that it teaches people to look on the underside of leaves. Everybody,
it does.
I mean, that's like a critical thing for a gardener. People watch their gardens standing there and looking down, and that's what they see, or sideways. Rarely do they get on their hands and knees or crouch down and flip over a leaf, and there's a lot of stuff going on the undersides, and that's one of the way you find out.
Make your kids do it. They're short. They're already down there. This is great work for children. That's why Isa and I have kids.
Okay.
Only reason.
I didn't even think.
That's why we also don't feed them completely, so they don't grow up too fast.
Very good.
Keep them small.
I'm reporting you to the proper authorities after this. All right. Thank you both for being here. We'll be back with more different species on the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki.
The best thing about my job is the excitement of waking up every morning just wondering what the challenges are going to be that day.
So how do you like my office?
We lead with safety. It's the first thing that I think about when I wake up. It's the last thing I think about when I go to bed.
We've got a number of employees in the office, myself included, who've been around for 10, 15 plus years. So people enjoy working for the company. Staff retention's a thing that we're very, very keen on.
It's no secret that the world of arboriculture is a male-dominated industry, but there is a fearless group of women out there that are determined to change that, and I'm really proud to be one of those women.
At my office, I feel like you could take just about anyone, put a crew together, and send them out to a job and have it be successful. And that has to do with trusting the people you work with, feeling safe around them, and knowing their strengths and weaknesses.
One of the proudest moments working with Bartlett for me was being the first to do training in a Spanish class.
Ya rompe el screen porch, el aire acondicionado.
Bartlett is all about promoting from within. We really want to focus on our people and make sure that they're trained, make sure that they understand their role, and you slowly grow through your experience, and then you improve and move on to different roles within the company.
There's always new positions, even at a base level, myself included. I started off as a climber and I've worked my way through to being local manager in the office.
Bartlett has been really great about recognizing any kind of roadblocks for different genders, different races, people of different nationalities, all of those roadblocks. Every tree needs a champion.
Every tree needs a champion.
Every tree needs a champion.
An environment radio with just a few by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and
food to eat and make me healthy. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawn serene. Give me all that I can take.
And welcome back to the show. And we're swapping out scientists and I apologize for getting a little bit late into this segment because you get scientists talking and you just can't shut them up. Yeah, really. But that's why I like it. I like having those folks on the show. People like that.
So we need the 3-hour show.
Don't even. Don't. My heart. My heart just, it stopped there. Welcome back to the show, folks. And that guy on your right, as I mentioned earlier, is also works at the Field Museum, except that he's the senior conservation ecologist, Doug Stotz. Oh, I'll give him a ding as well. Doug, welcome back to the show. I was looking back through our archives, and I didn't realize how many times you've been with us in the past, and we appreciate it every time.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've been on either. 3, maybe?
3, maybe 4. I don't know. Yeah.
Last August 9th, you and Bob were both on together talking about the plovers.
And there's Bob.
Right. Wow, I was trying to think back to that.
And Bob Dolgan is on the left there, and he's the creator of the excellent documentary Monty and Rose. About the piping plovers or plovers, however you pronounce them, at the lakefront on Lake Michigan in the city of Chicago. And he is also the creator of This Week in Birding, as you can see. And you can go to twibchicago.com, get on the mailing list. You're doing some great stuff, Bob, with that newsletter. I'm not even a birder, and I read it. And
but you will be.
You will be, yeah. And that term can be, kind of loaded. Everybody's a birder in a way, I like to think.
Well, so. I got to tell you, I'm noticing more and more. I mean, I'm paying attention to the birds in my yard. There are many more than just sparrows. Although I like to say I have 10,000 sparrows. I put the feeder, took it out of the back and put it to the front so that the seed can drop on the sidewalk and not into my garden. And there was a house sparrow there with the red.
House finch.
House finch. Sorry, not house. House finch. Sorry, house finch. There were a couple of them this morning that I was looking at. Yeah.
See, you do have birds.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. And a squirrel kept jumping on the feeder this morning as well. But
they literally knocked one of mine on the ground this morning. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So the reason you guys are here today is because of good news from the city of Chicago, from the Chicago Park District. It's something that Bob, you and I were going to talk about several weeks ago. We said we got to get back on the show so you can advocate for what just happened. So events beat us to the punch here. And Bob, why don't you explain what happened at Montrose Beach?
Sure. So I'll go back for your listeners. They may or may not know about the whole story of Monty and Rose, our endangered piping plovers that began to nest at Montrose Beach now almost 2 years ago. These birds hadn't nested in Chicago since 1955, so it was quite a surprise and also a thrill to have them in the city again. And going back to that time, I don't think anybody could have envisioned that one of the outcomes of their presence would be additional natural habitat out in the dune ecosystem there at Montrose Beach Dunes. It's our only state natural area on the north side, and it's been reduced a bit because of rising Lake Michigan water levels. And it's a small parcel. It's only about 12 acres or so. And what happened was with this is my interpretation of events. Maybe others would see it a different way, but I'll just say, having been out at the beach a lot last summer, the summer of 2020, when it was closed to the public, is a lot of plants began to recolonize the area that was temporarily closed for the plovers. And this was turned out to be about a 3-acre area that had been roped off and has this sort of standing water that we affectionately call a floodle, a flooded puddle, or some combination of those words. It's called a floodle, and that's where the plovers have fed the past 2 years. And as it was roped off, it just started to make sense that maybe that area should become permanently part of the official Montrose Dunes natural area. And so there were some steps that were taken. A request was made by site steward Leslie Bournes, and the Park District started considering it. It took some time over the winter. There were a number of letters written and emails and calls, but eventually, just last week, it was approved, and there will be 3 acres added to the 12 acres that were already there at Montrose Beach Dunes. And it may not seem like much. It's only 3 acres, but in a big city, where there's precious real estate of all kinds, let alone natural areas out there on the lakefront, this is a big success, and it means that the plovers will have more room to roam. Hopefully, when they come back this year, they won't be dealing with everything from volleyballs to kids with sand buckets to passersby going into their area, but instead this will be a more formally protected area, and it will still be open to the public when the plovers aren't there. So
yeah,
it's just a success on so many levels. Additionally, with the water levels so high, having that natural barrier is going to be great too. And and actually, despite the many uses of Montrose Beach, people were in favor of this. The volleyball players, everybody, the business owners thought this was a good idea. So it just shows what's possible when people come together. So hopefully, it's the start of other big things.
It's a I was just going to say, it's a remarkably forward-looking action by the Chicago Park District. It's just, I don't think anybody expected it to be this easy.
And as informal too. It wasn't a long, drawn-out process.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, having not gone through that before, the process was a little bit unclear at times, I'll be honest. But it was, it was a success, and we got the alderman's backing, and it took some time, but we also have like an amazing community of people out there. It's come together around the plovers. A lot of people didn't even know each other before 2 years ago, and are friends now. And you've got the boat owners there. You've got the restaurant visitors and customers, the kayak rentals. Everybody is sort of rallied around this story, and it's pretty cool. So we're glad.
So Doug, one of the things when we were talking the other day, you were saying that you know some really, really good people at the Park District who are good at their science and good at what they do. That probably had a lot to do with this, don't you think?
Yeah, the Park District, is a huge, multifaceted organization, and different people have different ideas of what parks should be used for. But one thing they do have is they have a really high quality team that works on natural areas. And we've done a lot of work with them elsewhere in the city and they are great people. We're really lucky to have a team like that, and it makes all the difference in the world for the park district being important for conservation.
So let's talk about what Bob mentioned in this turn of events. We're adding 1.3 acres. You were also talking to me the other day that you've been working in South America and you're dealing with millions of acres of land and the changes that you want to make to that. How much effect can adding 1.3 acres to a 12-acre site, how much difference can it make?
Well, first, if Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've got it reversed. I think it's 3.1 acres.
I'm sorry, 3.1.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
3.1 acres. Don't take away our 2 acres.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and because I was saying 1 acre the other day, and I went back and looked at the numbers. I went, no, it's 3 acres, and I'm sorry. So it's 3.1, not 1.3. But I'm just being a little dyslexic there. So
yeah, 3 acres. We need that, and the plovers need that. So. Don't do that to us, Mike.
I'm so sorry. Don't worry. I have no influence with the park district. None at all, believe me. So what difference can that make, Doug?
So, it's it's an entirely different scale, of course. And we live in a state where, the vast majority of the state has been altered into, cities and cornfields and reservoirs and whatnot. And so we have relatively little land to begin with. And what I'd say is when you've got that little land, little pieces can make a big difference. Now, 3.1 acres is not going to get us a jaguar. There are other reasons we won't have jaguars, but that's not sort of the scale. But you just heard Isa and Erika talking about the monarch, and for an animal like that, 3.1 acres can make a huge difference. And sort of the same thing here on the lakefront for the water birds, the plovers and other shorebirds that migrate through here, and a set of land birds that breed in the dune vegetation are sort of used to a situation where you have a very narrow strand of habitat that's patchy. And so, but having a bigger patch can make it a better patch. And that's what we're getting at Montrose. The Park District has created other habitat patches at other beaches as well. So there's the southeast end of Rainbow Beach has restored dune habitat. There's restored dune habitat down in Jackson Park. There's the bigger habitat that's there at
Northerly.
Okay, Northerly Island. There we go. So these patches of habitat along the lakefront are sort of stepping stones for a lot of migratory birds. And Montrose is a place where I hate to say this, I don't go birding there because there are too many birders there. But
whoa,
far and away,
whoa, that's a whole nother story.
It's far and away the best place for migratory birds along the lakefront, and that's both land birds and water birds. It's if you want to see shorebirds along Lake Michigan, you go to Montrose, and that was before Monty and Rose.
Yeah. So it's and what I'm going to do here is bring up. Well, let's first of all. Sorry, folks.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing that up. I'm just wondering because the lakefront didn't have people for the most part for the last year, and so the birds were able to expand a little bit anyways, and now they're getting this extra portion of the habitat. Do you think that those combined are going to have an even better effect?
Yeah, I think it will have an effect. The issue is going to be, of course, people have a lot of pent up desire to hit the beach this year because they didn't get a chance to do it much last year. So I suspect the lakefront will not be empty this summer. Although there's still going to be some restrictions, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no question that the not having people on the lakefront meant there was a lot more opportunity for nature on the lakefront, and the shorebirds are an important example of this. The main threat to them is disturbance, and so when you do things to reduce the disturbance, that helps them quite a bit. And at Montrose, part of the turning point there was the creation of the first sanctuary area, which fenced off a little bit of the beach for basically the shorebirds to take advantage of, and it worked.
Yeah, and that's the danger is, and I'm going to pop this up here so you can see. This is the floodle, right, Bob?
Yeah, that's right. That excuse me. That's where Monty and Rose have, and many other shorebird species have foraged the past 2 years. Yeah.
Now, is this the area that's being added? Or
This is right in the heart of the area that will be added. And previously it had to be temporarily roped off, but now it'll be more permanently roped, and the land there will also be maintained, and so there will be work done around the amount of vegetation and making sure that it's the right mix of open sand and vegetation that plovers like.
Yeah, and that's part of the deal here. If to people looking at this, they're going to say, "Well, that doesn't look like much."
Yeah, it does. It just looks like a little.
It's a floodle.
It's a floodle. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, that term floodle. I just learned. I kind of use it, like I throw it around all the time, and so do people out at Montrose. And a lot of people don't know what this term means, but it is just a combination of the word flood and puddle, and it's the sort of standing water we get, especially in spring, all over Chicago and almost any ball field or farm field or woodland. But here it's almost year round. There's some of it is fed by Lake Michigan.
So would this actually be the interdunal wetland, or is that a different designation?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would count as an interdunal wetland. It may. That might be a little beyond my what I could say authoritatively, but it's somewhat like that. I mean, it somewhat mimics these sort of dune and swale habitats that you see more in places like Indiana dunes. And this is truly a dune and swale habitat. This is a very small scale compared to Indiana dunes or Sleeping Bear dunes or somewhere like that, where you have just a lot of these, more steep-sided kind of, dunes where water collects. But yeah, I mean, it does the job. I mean, there's enough in these wetlands for the adult plovers and the young ones to find forage. It attracts all sorts of species, like I've said, shorebirds, herons, you name it. And I think one of the things that swallows are flitting around there. We've got the bank swallow colony, which unto itself is a phenomena over there at Montrose Beach. And so it's really beneficial, as Doug said, that in terms of shorebirds on Lake Michigan, and when you think about how many places can shorebirds even stop when they're going, these are birds that go from, say, South America all the way to the Arctic. How many places, many of them, how many places can they stop? Like where are the places to stop? And we need to have this sort of mosaic of stopover points if they're going to make it. And, I was saying to some folks last week, like, this is a win not just for Chicago birds, but all those birds that use that area on their way going north or going south. They need these places, and if we don't protect them, or if we just let dogs run all over the beach, they're not gonna come back, or they're gonna be disturbed, and that's gonna lead to higher mortality and perhaps the numbers not going the right way.
So what kind of birds, Doug, can we expect to be seeing at this time of year coming through Chicago?
So it's still early. Bird watchers are bad this way. So as soon as it warms up in March, you start thinking about all the birds that should be here. And it's, I go out and it's still early in April. So a lot of stuff isn't quite here yet. The shorebirds are starting to arrive. So things like pectoral sandpiper, yellowlegs, killdeer, some of the early shorebirds are starting to come through. The migratory shorebirds actually peak in the latter part of May. And I remember a number of years ago when we were talking about trying to sort of balance between the birders and the birds and other uses at Montrose. This was the Department of Environment, and they said, so all we really need to worry about is the migratory periods, so spring and fall. And I said, well, the problem with that is spring goes until mid-June, and fall starts the 4th of July weekend. So, there's not much time in between those periods. And until Monty and Rose, basically, the big thing at Montrose was this migratory movement. All these migrant shorebirds coming through from basically March until October or November. But then Monty and Rose decided to make it their summer home, and now we have a new component to it. For many years, that's been the best place to see migratory piping plovers. They'd stop on their way north, and I really thought piping plovers were gone from Illinois and would not come back. So it's just so stunning that this has happened, and even more stunning, this happened at Montrose.
It is amazing. And speaking of Monty and Rose, as we mentioned before, Bob did that documentary a couple of years ago, and now you're working on part 2. So this is the point at which I give you a quick plug. Let's take a look at your trailer.
Something interesting was happening with these plovers, in that it wasn't such an impossibility that maybe we'd have plovers that could nest here. When Monty and Rose came, that changed everything. After last season, I think many of us really wondered whether we'd see those birds again. They go through migration, which can be a very dangerous journey. When we heard they were back, it was really exciting. I never dreamed that the dunes would develop as they have and become as biodiverse and important for birds. I think over the course of this season, what we've realized is these birds are site faithful, and we really have a responsibility now.
And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, folks can go to Monty and Rose, you spell it out, montyandrose.net, to find out information about Monty and Rose too. So you're in production for that right now, Bob.
Yeah, so we're almost done with the actual filming of it, but then things keep on happening. There's new chapters to the story that at some point this is going to need to be cut off, and we're going to need to wrap it and kind of work on some editing. But we're waiting for hopefully Monty and Rose to come back, and their young ones were banded last year. So I think the big question going into this season to me is, where will the young ones turn up? There's a high likelihood that they're going to be seen somewhere here around the Great Lakes, and they already have been seen down on the wintering grounds. So we'll get to find out where Chicago plovers return in the summer, Chicago hatched plovers, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so we do plan to film out later this year.
And Bob has I threatened him, and now, and he says he's going to take the next time he grabs his camera.
And birds these days, a lot of the issues we think of for migratory urban areas can really make a significant difference. And Erika were talking about through this area. And, I often sort of unfairly refer to central Illinois as the great corn soybean desert. And when they migrate north, Chicago is really the first good rest area for a lot of these migratory birds. And there's not much habitat till they get here, and then suddenly there's habitat in a lot of places.
It's counterintuitive, it seems, in some ways.
It is counterintuitive, but that's if you look at like maps of where the nature preserves are, or where endangered species occur in Illinois, they're concentrated in the Chicago area. And it's because in much of the rest of the state, it got turned into farm fields. While in Chicago, it never really got turned into farm fields, and we've been able to bring it back. I mean, I don't think people really appreciate what a spectacular thing we have with city parks with natural areas, not just ball fields, but natural areas, and the forest preserves. They're just an incredible resource.
That's a great way to end it. Is a tribute to our urban areas and suburban right, and the forethought of people 100 years ago who protected the park district, or I'm sorry, forest preserve district.
Yeah.
And as you say, the park district as well, our parks and our forest preserves. So, Bob Dolgan, thank you so much for being here. Doug Stotz, always a pleasure to have you. Appreciate it, and let's see what happens. I can't wait to see if Monty and Rose come back. And Bob, you're going to take me out there with you.
Yeah, you should do it. Can we do a live show from out there, or is that too much to ask? Is that too much to dream about?
We're going to try. Believe me, if I'm going out there, we're going to give it a go. It might be
all right.
Might be on myself. All right.
Let me know how I can help.
Yeah, give a holler.
All right, it's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Meteorologist Rick DiMaio is next. At this time of year, we spend a lot of time indoors with our plants, so help them thrive. The plants you're viewing were treated with Leafzyme, a foliage spray designed to activate beneficial microbes already present on the leaves. A spritz every few weeks promotes growth-enhancing microorganisms that process dust and other particles into nutrition that indoor plants can absorb through their leaves for beautiful and vigorous growth. Go to blazing-star.com and check out their BioGarden line for home gardeners.
At Sitka Salmon Shares, we take pride in being a seafood company that's a little different. In fact, 10 seasons ago, our motto was "We do salmon differently." Nowadays, we harvest 15 species of wild-caught Alaskan fish, but still call ourselves Sitka Salmon Shares because, well, we're a little different. Our difference starts with our fleet of fishermen who own a slice of the company and are paid above industry average. They deliver fish to our docks in about half the time as other fishermen, which means higher quality of fish for you. And we never buy our fish from large processors where we don't know how each fish was caught or handled, like most other companies do. Another difference is our fish plant, which we own too. Our plant freezes fish about twice as cold and twice as fast as the other guys. This produces unparalleled quality at a cellular level. Our difference extends to you too. By joining our community, you band together with thousands of other people who want to make a difference in the way that their food is produced. This allows our fishermen to harvest fish just for you, with the respect, thought, and care that the fish, the ocean, and you deserve. So, be a little different. Join us at SitkaSalmonShares.com.
You can help slow climate change in 2021 by composting, and you don't even need a backyard. By composting communally in multi-unit buildings across Chicagoland, Collective Resource Compost has diverted 7,000 tons of food scrap since 2010. CRC brings you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter, they swap it out, and get it to a commercial composting operation. Fight climate change. Go to collectiveresource.us.
And welcome back, and there he is in the bottom left corner of your screen. Good morning, Rick DiMaio, and happy Sunday.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Good morning, Peg.
Good morning.
Happy rainy, soggy Sunday. Something.
Oh, I got
needed,
blue
right?
sky. I got blue sky right now. It's coming your way, Rick.
You're not supposed to contradict the weather guy.
No,
Okay.
it started that way, and in the last 15 minutes, it's turned to blue sky.
Wow.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of blue up there, Mike. I'm not going to argue with that.
It's heading your way.
It's probably heading Rockford's way, being that I'm south of you, but that's okay. But yeah, this is what happens when you get underneath these big upper air lows where the surface low is to the west into the occluded part. So you just basically have the clouds and rain kind of spinning over you during the overnight period. And I'm just going to go through some of the rainfall totals, even though I sent you a map. These are some of the updated ones. 0.26 inches at O'Hare, 0.2 at Midway, 0.33 at Romeoville, but you get a little bit further north and west, 0.86 at Rockford, 0.43 up near Peg. When you get out to the northwestern part of the state, we had totals easily over an inch and a half. Matter of fact, yeah, Joe Davies County, Stevenson County, anywhere between an inch and a half to 2 inches, and out by the Quad Cities, nearly 3 inches of rain fell. So they were on the, what's called the upper low, where everything just kind of spinning around, and you get the end of rain. It just kind of sits there for a good solid, 12 to 15 hours. But as you saw in some of the information that I sent you, we're down about 2 inches. And even though we're down, it's amazing what happened in the last week with our 12 degrees above normal temperature departure. 4 days in the 70s, 2 of those, we eclipsed the 80-degree mark, something that we don't normally see around here on average till about the 26th of April. And I mentioned it so many times in the last 2 months, the ground pretty much had some decent subsoil moisture. The temperatures of the subsoil moisture, about 4 inches down, were probably around 45 to about 50 degrees. So all you needed was, 2 or 3 nights of temperatures in the 60s, which is what we had. A couple of days were readings in the 80s, and all of a sudden it looks like the 26th or 27th of April, not the 6th or 7th of April from a couple of days ago. It's like we leapfrogged the middle of April and went all the way to the week of the month, and I'm happy about it. I think most people are happy about it as well.
Well, as Doug, whoa, I'm getting a feedback here. All right, as Doug Stotz, there we go. Sometimes it just pops up. And
yeah, you were echoing.
Yeah, Doug was saying that even the birders got faked out because they expect to have all these different species come through, and he has to remind people, hey, it's still the beginning of April. There's a lot of time. We get a couple of days that touch on 80, and everybody thinks summer's here. Now let's wear shorts and t-shirts, and that's it. We're moving on.
No, we didn't leapfrog the month of May. We just leapfrog a couple of weeks in April. And as we all know, early May around here could be just as drab. But as I mentioned in a report yesterday to the both of you, I don't see 70s or 80s around here probably until, if not the end of April, maybe early May for another set of 80-degree days. The pattern becomes much more bogged down, which is typical for, mid-April to get these big upper lows, these occluded systems. We just get a lot of clouds and, off and on drizzle. It's basically summer, trying to fight, the winter season. And because the Great Lakes and Hudson's Bay locks onto that cool weather longer than anywhere else, we end up with usually very cloudy periods. But again, I mentioned this last week, lake water temperature of Lake Michigan is running warmest even this week, since 1995. And you can almost tell that when the wind is off the lake, it doesn't have that bite to it that it normally would in early April. It almost feels like late April. So this is good. This is good news. The grass is green, the trees are budding, and we got a nice head start. No,
just
no
don't
one has
plant
to
your
complain.
tomatoes yet. No.
Yeah, we know that for sure. But even over the next week and a half to 2 weeks, Peg, I don't see anything in the way of really super cold polar air coming down over us. Whatever is over the northern parts, or say the western areas of Canada and southern sections of the plains of Canada, whatever snow is up there is gone. And even over areas of like eastern Montana and North Dakota, they're in a serious drought out there, mainly due to the fact that some areas, I was looking at Dickinson, North Dakota, a grand total of 6 inches of snow for the winter. I don't think I've ever
how much
seen
you cut out? How much, Rick?
Dickinson, North Dakota, literally 6 inches of snow for the winter.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That's North
dry.
Dakota. Wow.
And normally they're up around 40 or 50 inches. So typically that's where some of our real late outbreaks come from.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you're going to say don't plant tomatoes. Probably the next 2 weeks you might be able to, but yeah, there's really nothing in the way of any super cold weather coming back at us.
So no ice storms, no snows like last year.
No, the pattern's much different than what it was last year.
So we're in spring. It's not going to be 80 degrees, but it's also not going to be freezing and snowstorms.
As I like to use the analogy, if you're playing the Wheel of Fortune and you're trying to spell out spring as sprung, we're on the U of sprung. We filled in the whole thing.
Okay, I got an email. And speaking of vegetables and planting them, our friend Dan Costa from Vern Goer's greenhouse in Hinsdale wrote to me, "Hi, Mike. Amazing how many people are buying tomatoes, peppers, and other vegetables. Most don't even have true leaves yet. No one seems to realize it's April 10th and not May 10th. People also want to plant annuals already. I think at least one night next week." Now, you can tell us about this, Rick. He says he thought one night next week will be in the 30s, so they will all be back to complain about their dead plants.
Yeah, but it won't be the low 30s. So there's really nothing like a polar jet stream coming our way. But a couple of things. I don't know if you guys mentioned the stuff that I sent you, but I mean, this is great news. Joe Biden was vice president under Barack Obama for 8 years, and Obama clearly had his, legacy built. Really tried to put forth, the notion of sustainability and climate change. But it's almost like Biden is trying to build maybe an even bigger legacy, which I think is really amazing. But what has happened this past week is truly unbelievable. Biden, though I should say the Biden administration, proposed a record budget for NOAA. The budget is $6.9 billion. That's fantastic. It's a $1.4 billion increase from what Trump had. Actually, it's a $1.4 billion increase from the previous year and nearly $2.3 billion of what President Trump had. And I was thinking about this, a $1.4 billion increase, that's, I think, like 5 of the top salaries, in Major League Baseball. You got some of these players who now have $250 million contracts, granted, over the life of, 10 years or something like that. And when you hear $1.4 billion, it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. I mean, look how much money we waste on the Department of Defense. And here we are excited about 1.4.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to be excited about this. This is something that should be there all the time, especially when you look back at the fact that we had 22 natural disasters last year. Each of those were over $1 billion. Now, the number, or say the total number of dollar amount from those 22 natural disasters was about $55 billion. And that's actually a low number. We've had as high as 200 to 300 billion. So the fact that we're only spending 1.4 billion is like literally still a drop in the bucket, considering if you look at where that money is going, which I think is really, really fantastic. It's actually using climate-related data to make forecasts for adaptation and mitigation efforts. This is everything that the IPCC wants research to go. They can't make the call. They just make recommendations. This is where the National Climatic Assessment Data Group, one that is championed by Professor Don Wubbles down at the U of I. This is something that's been going on for about 8 years or so, which is how to get forecasts from climate data, as opposed to just, well, we think this is where it should be.
So we're using the results of these climate assessments to make adaptation and mitigation forecasts, which is really where we should be going, because clearly, we know that we're not going to, stop the warming of the planet. We just went over 420 parts per million.
Yeah, I saw
carbon
that.
dioxide. Yeah, and that was after a year of the pandemic. So even with the pandemic bringing down the usage of global oil, which is typically about 100 million barrels a day, that's the demand for global oil, 100 million. During the pandemic, we got it down to 92. Even though we got it down to 92, it literally had no dent, like literally no dent on the long-term trend of CO2. So we clearly have to change our game plan. The pandemic, as bad as it has been, was probably, I hate to say this, a good thing for science, because it kind of shook our cages and made us think of what we really have to do over the next 50 years.
Yeah, that increase includes $800 million to expand investments in climate research, support regional and local decision-making with climate data and tools, and improve community resilience, as you mentioned, which is great. But you're so right in putting it in perspective. 1.4 billion increase compared to what the money we just throw at the military. Yeah, more bombs, more guns. Yeah, the world, the climate change is going to kill us all eventually. You'd think that might be a serious consideration if you're looking at your security, but that's the best. At least we're doing. At least it's going up and not down. Yeah,
it's a start.
Yeah,
in the right direction.
And some of the data, because usually when you get into about the second or third month of either 1991, 2001, 2011 to 2021, we take the previous 30-year climate record. So in other words, we were using 1980, 1990, and 2000 up to 2010 as our previous 30-year running average. We have now shifted from 81 to 2010 to 91 to 2020. Okay, so we're actually able to shift that running 30-year average. And part of that average includes what we call average Atlantic hurricane season activity. So typically we get 12 named storms. Sometimes 5, 6 of those are hurricanes, 3 are major hurricanes. We've now shifted from 12 to 14. So that's because we had a very, very active period in the 90s and also in the 2004-2005 season, as well as 2020, where we had 30 named hurricanes. So now the average is going to be 14 named storms. We went from 6 to 7 hurricanes, still 3 major hurricanes. But another thing is that they've decided to get rid of the Greek alphabet. So once you go past, I think it's like storm number 21 or 22, instead of using the Greek alphabet, which to me never really made sense, because A, no one knows the Greek alphabet, and B, no one knows what C or D or F is. They would think it'd be like alpha, beta, Kairos, delta, epsilon, and theta, whatever. And it was all over the place. So after exhausting the Greek alphabet in 2005 and last year, they decided once you're past that number 21, you go back to A, B, C, D, E, and F. So that's another thing that the National Hurricane Center and NOAA has agreed on.
I hadn't heard that, and so that's great. I also wondered about the Greek alphabet. It just didn't seem to.
Because nobody gets it. But so Rick, you said you had to leave a little early, so.
Yeah, I got another 2 or 3 minutes. And the reason why is I just heard. No, that's fine, because I just heard Rebecca turn the hairdryer on. So usually that gives me 5 minutes.
Okay, unless she's using it to dry something, a spill or something, or
No. Something else I wanted to talk to you guys about was the Arctic blast that hit Texas.
Right. Yes.
This ended up being a really, really bad freeze to those areas in the Rio Grande Valley, the worst since 1989.
Yeah.
Potentially affecting the monarchs too, coming through.
Yeah, I heard something about that, but this has been something that we were worried about. It was late in the season. We've had an overall warming of that part of Texas and right along the Rio Grande for the last 20 or 30 years. So things actually butted out a little bit ahead of schedule, and then we had this freeze. So bottom line, $380 million and counting in agricultural damage, $230 million alone to citrus, and at least 50% of the crop had already begun its spring floral blooms that typically arrive in about mid-February. This was kind of right on time from a standpoint of when they normally do, but as we know, this was not one freeze, but it was like 2 and 3, the way it just kept kind of coming through that particular area. Also,
you said 3.8 million fish killed as well.
Yeah, and then we're also beginning to realize that having fish farms is probably a little bit better, maybe a little bit sustainable, being that we kind of know where the fish are, we kind of know how to keep them, healthy, and whether or not people like, salmon caught in the river because that's more sporty, or fish from a fish farm. I don't really know how to go on that. But from a standpoint of, from the fish farm killed, Peg, this is not good. So as much as you see all these people in Texas going to a ball game with no masks on, and Governor Abbott continuing to blame everything on everybody else, Texas has got some big problems that they have to figure out between how to protect their crop and then how to protect their wind turbines as well.
Well, and on the list that you sent us, more than 10,000 rescues of stunned sea turtles, including at least 7,000 along the lower Texas coast. And that's a record since statistics began in 1980. Yeah, I mean, all this collateral damage, obviously, people died during that freeze, and people lost their water, and we look at all the damage done to homes and businesses and to the population there, but look at the damage, as you're saying, done to crops and to wildlife as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I just taught Chapter 8 last week and Chapter 9 this week at Loyola, which is, Chapter 8 is all about politics and policy and climate change. And I literally had to rewrite the entire chapter based on the fact that we're now back in the Paris Climate Accord. Biden administration has put forth all these efforts on how he wants to do things, particularly with infrastructure. And then you hear the Republicans just continually knock down the infrastructure plan because it has all these things that are related not to infrastructure but climate change. But I don't know if they realize, but climate change has a huge impact on infrastructure. And the fact that they're using that as something to say, well, you guys are just putting this in there because you want your green energy in there. No, that has nothing to do with it. Infrastructure has everything to do with levees giving way on the Mississippi River. Seawalls needed to be built in areas of southern Louisiana to protect those gas and chemical refineries that were hit by not one, not two, not three, but 4 hurricanes in that area. That's one of the reasons why we had a spike in gasoline prices. So when you want to, I think, from a Democratic standpoint, Democratic Party, present this to the overall public, they got to really begin to focus on the fact that this is not an infrastructure bill that has climate change policies in it. It's an infrastructure bill that's going to protect us from the costs and ever-increasing rebuilding of the risk that we're seeing from a changing and more variable climate. And when you present that to the public and people, and you almost have to say, this is how this much costs. This is how this much costs. This is how this much costs. This bill will spend $1 to save 4. You'll get more public support in that way. And not only public support, but if you get more public support, then hopefully the lawmakers will go, yeah, you know what, maybe this is a good idea. So I hope that is how that comes through. So that was Chapter 8, and now Chapter 9 is basically all about energy. And oh my God, I mean, when you look at the changes just alone from wind energy and solar energy, particularly in China over the last 2 or 3 years, it really is quite amazing where we went from the pandemic and then where we're expecting to be. So anybody who's teaching a sustainability class or a climate change class, if you're not up on cuts, like literally weekly and monthly, then you're back in the 1990s, and you're not doing your students justice. That's not saying that what I'm doing is right. I'm just saying it's one of those things where it's not all about recycling or composting. It's all about the policies involved, because everything now is based on whether or not it fits into the economy and being American and being America first. So it's a tough road to climb.
Right after the show, I'm giving Biden a call and tell him he needs to chat with you. And we've got to get you doing their messaging in this infrastructure bill. All right, we need a forecast for what is now realistic spring.
We're still in the U. Think of the Wheel of Fortune.
Spring has sprung.
And next week, next week we'll see the end pop up, and I'll have Vanna White trying to pull it, but the window off the lake is keeping it caught, right? There you go, Peg. All right, so upper 40s, lower 50s now from the north and west. A little bit of sprinkle activity, a little bit of drizzle, not a big deal. Looks like dry weather Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So the next 6 days, things dry out, but the wind slowly moves in off the lake Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it'll be basically every day a bit of a wind off the lake, keeping us somewhat cool. And with that, just a lot of off and on clouds. Nothing real sunny, definitely nothing real warm. Normal highs now up to close to 60. I don't think we're going to see anything near that long-term perspective anytime soon. So you get this every once in a while. So it's nice that we had the 70s and 80s last week. We're running 12 degrees above normal. This is the warmest first 10 degrees of April in the history of Chicago, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, but it sort of did in my daffodils. It got too warm too fast, and then they sort of petered out. But there's other stuff coming up. So you're saying, will we get to 60s during the week?
No 60s, no 70s, and no 80s. Basically 50s.
Really? Okay, because I saw some forecast somewhere said we might hit 60 if we get
like tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, we might hit 61 or 62, but
or at midway,
much of the day
maybe.
will be 1 or 2 hours of 60 degrees. That's it.
Okay, cool. All right, have a great Sunday. Talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. And there we go.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, folks. So let's see if we can do this. See, it's even at the lower level. Kathleen said last week was very funny because we were doing ba 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 ba, but the mics,
the mics were not on.
What? Because they automatically cut off when it reaches. Anyway, you don't need to know that. I want to thank everybody who was on the show today. Erika Hasle and
Isa Redlinski.
Thank you, Isa Redlinski and Doug Stotz and Bob Dolgan and Rick DiMaio. Want to thank Kathleen, as always, Legata, and Basil the dog. And until next time, go green or
go home.
Stadler?
Yeah, what?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.